Hi guys, and thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to your weekly painting tutorial. In this tutorial I want to talk about how I use tools for my abstract layers, why I use abstract layers, and when I add them onto my canvas, when is the right point to build them into your composition, and maybe why I do not use them in some compositions. And before we start, I will show you in the footage how I build up my painting, which is of course the usual way I do in most of my paintings, and sometimes I need abstract layers and sometimes I don't really need them, or just almost no abstract layers at all, just only some washes, like in my nebula painting where I only use a subtle wash under her neck. And I started this painting. The title, by the way, is On Ryo, which is Japanese and means a vengeful spirit. This is for an upcoming show in Cactus Gallery, and the show is called Bad Girl and Outcasts. The character I portrait is like I said, a ghost that hunts down innocent boys, and she basically just consists of the upper part of her torso, because this spirit emerged from a girl that was hit by a train and sliced in half. So super creepy. If you want to learn more about that story, look up Teke in Wikipedia or watch my other YouTube video I will have uploaded in the next days probably. But now back to the tutorial, of course. Now you see that I have already made the first layer of the face and the hair, just to have the contrast already set up in the composition, so I know which parts of the composition are the most darkest, and also which colors are important, and so I placed them all directly on the canvas. And I also added my color washes in the beginning, because after I started the composition, here comes my thoughts that come when I do abstract layers, is that even though I liked the composition in the first place, it was too messy. So I added so many flowers and so many foliage and also a window in the background due to their character, that it was too messy and I didn't like it that much. So I thought, whatever, I will make it more abstract, to just merge everything together and don't paint every little detail, because in the end it will not look as good as I imagined it. Even if I paint all these little flowers and leaves, that doesn't mean that it will look good. Because when I look at my composition from the distance, or when I squint my eyes, I don't see and recognize all the details anyways. And many people that look at artworks, including me, don't see all the details at once that the painter painted. So even if you have a trained eye, you will not see all the details anyways, especially not at the first glance. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't paint details at all, but it should just show that details aren't that important, especially not painting them super fine. So there is a difference between painting details and painting fine. You can paint an egg perfectly fine, but it doesn't have many details. But imagine if there is an Easter egg with a pattern on it. So you can paint the full pattern and paint every detail, but it doesn't have to be fine. It just can be painted a little bit more roughly, but it still looks detailed. So this is the difference between detail and painting something fine. It took a bit until I understand that myself, so I thought I would just share this bit of experience with you. I decided that the details on my composition weren't worth it, because in the distance and when I looked at them with squinting the eyes, everything blurred into each other, and it was more a blurry, muddy mass than something else. So this was my decision why I wanted to make these areas abstract. And to start with my abstract layers, I wait for my first layer to dry, so I can just add these washes when it is dried. And for that I use just Gamsol and oil paint and dilute it so that it is almost a bit like watercolor. But sometimes I like to make those washes into the wet oil color because that looks very natural, and I don't mind if some of the things I already painted will be destroyed a bit. I find that even beautiful sometimes. So with this painting I already finished the face, and it was dried, but the hair wasn't dried, and so I just added these washes into the background and around her hair so that the washes could destroy certain areas, which I found very beautiful. But this is not the last step of my abstract layers. This is just only the underlaying pattern that I want to have, so it will not stay like that. But before I can continue, the painting has to dry for several days because those washes take the longest to dry, because I used a lot of Gamsol and not liquid for mixing the oil paint, and everything that is not mixed with liquid will take a couple days to dry. So I had to wait. And after that, after it was dried, the next step for me is before I even can and want to paint the bird or the face or other details, I have to get the abstraction right. So this is important for me because it already connects important parts of the composition and makes everything a little bit more appealing as before, and this would distract me from concentrating on things like the face. So I have to get like the surrounding already appealing, not perfect, but already appealing. And for that I use a pressure roller. This thing is available in art stores. I think it is normally used for linoleum prints, but it is a super useful tool for painting as well. Although it is more easy to use it on a panel because the canvas is very elastic and can dent if you use too much pressure with the rolls. So what I do usually is that I just mix a lot of paint for my pressure roller and I mix it with another brush, so usually a thick brush, and I mix a lot of paint, and the consistency of the paint is that it is not pure oil paint. I mix it with liquid and maybe a teeny tiny bit of Gamsol, but not too much, so the consistency should be very fluid, like a salad dressing. I think this is a great comparison. Maybe a yogurt dressing. So this should be the consistency that you need. And then I just roll the pressure roller in it and apply the paint on the canvas. And I try to use the light tones and the dark tones as well of my composition. So I normally don't add so many new colors to the composition. I only, because I want to connect the composition, use the colors I already have and just place them with the pressure roller, place those strokes over areas that I find too messy and that I think should be connected. And this part is very difficult for me because it is easy to destroy the composition and to do too much, and so I sometimes wipe areas out and just try again. And I also use tape for leaving some areas out and just because I can't control the textures that I create with the roll, I tape some areas out. This is very helpful. And what you can do too is that you can use the edges of the roll. So you see that at the bottom left area under her hair there are these stripes, these relatively fine stripes, and I got those by using only the edge of my pressure roller. And to do abstract layers, your creativity is completely free, so you can basically use anything. You don't need to use a palette knife or a pressure roller. You can basically use everything that makes scratches or which could apply paint in some way to your canvas. For example, you can use sticks or old dried out brushes where all the hairs are spread like, I don't know, an old broom. These brushes are perfect for making hair strings, by the way. And I have some of these old brushes and I used them in this painting. So don't throw them away, especially those with long hair, because they can spread relatively large and they make a great brush for adding hair or abstract layers. So, and now I want to come to why I use abstract layers. And I mean, I already explained that I want to connect the composition, but sometimes I don't use them at all. And this is because I think the composition is already great. So it looks already nice in Photoshop. I don't have to connect anything or make something look more uniform. And sometimes abstract layers tend to flatten the image as well. So when I connect everything, the result is that everything looks as if it has only one layer and it is only this flat dimension. So you have to be careful to not use them too much. When I want to have depth in my paintings, I use them more carefully and don't paint over areas that give the illusion of depth. For my other painting, the nebulae painting, I didn't use so much abstraction because the galaxy background already looked good and I didn't want to destroy it. But when I have a background that anyways looks a little bit messy in Photoshop and I don't want to paint the background and copy it, I use abstract layers to make it more interesting and to just give the painting a more enticing and just interesting feeling. So, and after I finished the abstract layers on the background, I continue with painting the face and painting all these things out and finish everything that isn't finished yet. And what I really like is the contrast between the more or less realistic features of my painting and the abstract layers, of course. I think this makes a painting very interesting. I recently really fell in love with abstract paintings and I followed some new artists on Instagram, and I think it is very difficult to get abstract shapes right so that they look beautiful and they look kind of right. So everyone can just throw paint on a canvas and it looks abstract, but to get it that it looks harmonious is a completely different thing and super difficult. And even if I don't like the minimal art or abstract art that much, I only mean that I don't like these artists that don't get it harmonious and just throw paint on a canvas. I do not mean those artists who just stare hours on their painting and try to figure out what they have to do to get an abstract shape right. So I'm really impressed by those artists who can do that. And I find that they are a great inspiration because they teach us that when we look at a painting, I mostly see blurry areas of colors at first, and then I see the subject. So even with faces, of course, our brain recognizes faces in an instant, but it also registers the shapes of colors. So, and if you want to paint this abstract, you would only focus on the composition and you wouldn't focus on like getting the realism right. So when you and I would train more in abstract paintings, it would super strongly improve our art. So I'm not mainly an abstract painter, but I know that if I would train in that, I would learn more about composition and colors, and so I find it very important. And I started to follow some of these abstract painters, and I will do it in future. And I think this is a great source for inspiration and for just learn more about composition and colors. I hope this is not too complicated, what I wanted to explain. And so I will just make another example. If you have a composition and you can't see it sharp, so you see it blurry. Then you would see only abstract shapes, and you would see in an instant if they fit together or not, because it looks, for example, if everything has the same color value, everything would look flat. Or if your colors are too gray, everything looks very gray. And if you don't want that, then obviously this would help you to improve it. And you see the overall composition, so you see where the contrast on the painting is and where the strong areas on the painting are. Sometimes things in the background pop out, but they shouldn't do that. And it is only possible to see that when you make your eyes blurry, when you squint your eyes, or you just look at the thumbnail. So I do both actually, and it is so helpful. This is basically an abstract composition that I want to get right, and then when I have that right, I can focus on the realistic parts of the composition. So that's like the overall explanation why seeing something abstract can help. And the other thing is that adding abstract textures to your painting makes it more interesting as well. So once you have established a fitting and harmonious composition, then you could think about adding extra abstract layers. So for example, if you have a sky, the sky is only blue and there's no variation in it, or just a backdrop, because maybe you are like me and in the first beginning of learning to paint, I had absolutely no idea how to fill the background. So adding textures to a background is also super helpful with abstract layers. So this is why I love it so much. It is like a shortcut to fill an area with something that looks great and interesting, but you don't have to put so much effort and labor in it like you would put into painting a full background. So on the one side it is a shortcut, and on the other side it helps you to understand your composition more. And then if you go the next step, instead of saving like labor, you can use, even if you paint a detailed and sophisticated background, you can use the abstract layers to connect those elements together, but of course not losing depth. But you can use all these elements and using these abstract textures to make it just even better than a photo. So I don't like art that is just a copy of a photograph, and I absolutely love it when some artist is so skilled that he or she could use these abstract, like surreal elements that you look at something and you think, oh, it's a photo, but then at the second glance you see, what is it? What just happened? So you have like these surreal abstract things, like the head is dissolving in the background, something is wrong, and this is just, for me, this is the masterclass of painting. So I hope that I can do that in sometime in future too, and this is why I love abstractions so much. I hope this video tutorial was helpful, and in the last minutes of this footage you just see how I finished the face and the bird, and I decided to add a third layer on the face because the face of the model was so beautiful, and sometimes I don't really catch the beauty from my reference. Sometimes my models don't look as beautiful as the model, so I decided to add a third layer. And something with my third layer I use liquid and white. So I know that I said once that white should be more or less used thick and not diluted very much. So you should use thick white on your highlights. But what I use in addition is that I make a jelly-like oil paint mixture with white and, for example, cadmium red light or magenta, so that I have a nice skin tone, and I use liquid and mix that, and then it's just like a thick jelly, and I apply that as a third layer on the face. So this gives me a beautiful extra translucent layer that evokes the illusion of actual skin. So if you look at, because the liquid, when it dries, it is very shiny and it almost looks like resin. if you use a lot of it, but I can't use too much of it because it gets yellow after time. But I just use a very thin layer of this jelly paint mixture, and it really enhances the skin, and this is like my trick. And then when it dries, it don't has to dry perfectly, so it just has, because liquid dries so fast, it just has to dry for, I don't know, half an hour or so. I wait a bit. Normally I make my lunch break or so, and after that I add the highlights and thick white onto it. So I build up the skin in the third layer was this jelly liquid mix, and then I add extra highlights onto it. So I just wanted to add that because this is my trick for getting like the extra super touch on my paintings. And you don't need, you can also use this mixture for the shadows. So I use this when my color values are not perfectly right. I sometimes coat the entire face with a thin tinting layer of this liquid mix, and then I can it dries very fast though, so I have to work relatively quickly, and then I'm kind of like mold or model the face, because when the oil paint is wet, it is more or less difficult to model the face perfectly and to get the exact color and color values right. But when the face is dried and I use this thin liquid coat, I have more control. I have like the best control actually, and then I can get even the slightest bit of color values right, and this is super amazing. It is almost as if I would draw with color pencils, because with color pencils I have full control as well. I can really get the exact color like on the reference, but with oil paint it is normally difficult, but so this is my trick to get it perfectly. So I hope this whole painting tutorial about abstraction was helpful. If you want me to speak more about this topic, or if you have specific questions about it, please write them in the comments. I will answer them in my next videos or directly in the comments, because I haven't talked about abstractions that much, because I'm not an abstract painter and I am not as skillful in this area as I want to be, but I will learn in that, and I will pass all my experiences and little tricks with you and share them with you. So if you have any ideas or you want to know other things, just, I am here for you. Just message me. And I hope you liked it, and I hope I see you in the next one. Stay inspired and have a wonderful day. Bye bye!